प्रेम से बोलिए श्री आदि शक्ति देवी दुर्गा माता की जय। इसी तरह हम डिवोटीज शुभ स्वागतम. A most cordial welcome to you tonight, to the third night and the final night of this 3 nights of Devi Bhagwat Puran Yagya. On behalf of Mr. Mukesh Ramnath and family, let me extend a very special and cordial welcome to you to the final night of devotion in this 3 nights Devi Puran. At this point in time, khara ho jaye, let us all stand as we join together in Durga Mata Ji ki Arati. Om Sajam Chavarshitam Yuktam Vahina Yojitam Maya Deepam Grahan Devasya Trailokyam Timirapaham. Jai Ambe Gauri Maiya, Jai Shama Gauri. Jai Ambe Gauri Maiya, Jai Shama Gauri. तुमको निस दिन ध्यावत हरि ब्रह्मा शिव जी. बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी. सिंदूर विराजत टीको मृग मद को. उज्ज्वल से दो नैना चंद्रावली को. बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी. कनक समान कलेवर रक्तांबर राजय. रक्त पुष्प गलमाला कंठन पर साजय. बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी. रुद्रानी तुम कमला रानी. अगम निगम बखानी तुम शिव पतरानी. बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी. सौसत योगिनी गावत निच करत भैरो. बाजत ताल मृदंगा और बाजत डमरू. बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी. अतिशोभित वर मुद्राधारी मनवांछित फल पावत सेवक नर नारी। बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी। जो कोई नर गावे, कहत शिवानंद स्वामी सुख संपत्ति पावे। बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी। बोलो जय श्यामा गौरी। जगदम्बा देवी, जगदम्बा देवी, जय 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 जगदम्बा देवी। Let us all sing together with Jesus receive the blessings of Durga Devi. जगदम्बा देवी, जगदम्बा देवी, जय 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 जगदम्बा देवी। जगदम्बा देवी, जगदम्बा देवी, जय 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 जगदम्बा देवी। जगदम्बा देवी, जगदम्बा देवी। दुर्गे दुर्गे माँ दुर्गे, जय जय माँ। दुर्गे दुर्गे माँ दुर्गे, जय जय माँ। दुर्गे दुर्गे दुर्गे, जय जय माँ। दुर्गे दुर्गे माँ दुर्गे, जय जय माँ। करुणा सागर पालित पालित जगदोधारिणी माँ। हे काली जय जय माँ, हे काली जय जय माँ। दुर्गे दुर्गे माँ दुर्गे, जय जय माँ। 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 प्रेम से बोले श्री गजानन स्वामी की जय। उमापति महादेव की जय। पवन सुत हनुमान की जय। श्री वृंदावन बिहारी लाल की जय। उदय सा जगन्नाथ की जय। बोलो भाई सब संतन की जय। सियापति रामचंद्र की जय। आसन लीजिए, kindly be seated devotees. Our Pujari Pandit, Pandit Adaish Maharaj, Pandit Vasudev Maharaj, Shrutagan, Bhaktajan, devotees of God. Tonight, on behalf of Mr. Mukesh Ramnath and members of his family, let me extend to you a most cordial welcome tonight to this third night of these 3 nights of Devi Bhagwat Puran Yagya. As you know, these 3 nights of devotion is being held to mark the 1-year death anniversary, in fact 1 year and about 5 months since the passing of Anne-Marie Ramnath. And so we dedicate tonight, as we did the previous two nights, in her memory. And tonight, as we prepare ourselves once more to delve into the golden pages of Devi Bhagwat Puran Katha, we join together firstly in dhyan, in meditation, where we sit, we bring to our minds that most wondrous, beauteous form of Bhagwati Mata. O Mother, tonight as we come together in this beautiful Yagyashala, we do so with one common purpose, and that is to render unto you our prema bhakti, our love and devotions. Bless us this night to the successful completion of our devotions here this evening. And through your divine blessings, enable us to receive and to understand the wonderful lessons that you have enshrined for us within the pages of Devi Bhagwat Puran Katha. And so as we focus our thoughts and energies in this manner, we now blend our voices together as we pay our respects to Bhagwan in his manifold manifestations. Shirsha Devam Gauri Putram Vinayakam Bhaktvasam Smare Nityam Ayukam Arita Siddhaye Vidyarambhe Vivahicha Praveshe nirgame tatha sangrame sankate chaiva vighnatasya na jayate. Om Shweta Paramasanam Devim Shweta Pushpopashobhinim Shvetam Vardharam Nityam Shveta Gandhanulepanam Dhyanamulam Gurur Murti Pujamulam Gurur Param Mantramulam Gurur Vakyam Mokshamulam Gurur Param Adhyantarahite Devi Adi Shakti Maheshwari Yoga Jai Yoga Sambhute Mahalakshmi Namastute. Om Bhadrakali Namo Nityam Sarve Shakti Swarupini Jagatstute Ganga Mata Narayani Namastute. Nagindraharaya Trilochanaya Bhasmangaragaya Maheshwaraya Nityaya Shudhaya Digambaraya Tasmai Nakaraya Namah Shivaya. मनुजवं मारुततुल्यवेगम् जितेन्द्रियं बुद्धिमतां वरिष्ठं वातात्मजं वानरयूथमुख्यं श्रीरामदूतं शरणं प्रपद्ये। नीलाम्बुजं श्यामलकोमलाङ्गम् सीतासमारूपचिवामभाग्यं पाणुमहासायकचारुचापं नमामि रामं रघुवंशनाथम्। ॐ श्रीकृष्णाय वासुदेवाय देवकी नन्दनाय च नन्दगोपकुमाराय श्रीगोविन्दाय नमो नमः। या देवी सर्वभूतेषु दुर्गारूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। या देवी सर्वभूतेषु शक्तिरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। या देवी सर्वभूतेषु मातृरूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। या देवी सर्वभूतेषु लज्जारूपेण संस्थिता नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। नमस्तस्यै 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 नमो नमः। ॐ शान्ति 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 हरि ओम्। Let us dedicate our thoughts to Shri Pavan Putra Hanuman Swami as we join together in this bhajan glorifying the Divine Lord, Shri Hanumanji. सिद्धि सदन आनंद करनी मंगल मूर निधान लक्ष्मण और तुलसीदास हित रामचंद्र भगवान। बंदव पार धरी धरनी शीस महावीर हनुमान बल बुद्धि विद्या दीजिए निज चरणन हनुमान। हरे राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान। हरे राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान। सुनो हनुमान सुनो हनुमान सुनो हनुमान राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान। हरे राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान। सीता हरण मरण दशरथ को लागे लक्ष्मण बाण लागे लक्ष्मण बाण। सीता हरण मरण दशरथ को लागे लक्ष्मण बाण। इतनी विपत्ति परिहरि ऊपर, इतनी विपत्ति परिहरि ऊपर, सोचत कृपा निधान। राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान, हरे राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान। सुनो हनुमान सुनो हनुमान, सुनो हनुमान, राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान, हरे राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान। लक्ष्मण मरहु हम मर जय के, सिया सुनीच जी प्राण, सिया सुनीच जी प्राण। लक्ष्मण मरहु हम मर जय के, सिया सुनीच जी प्राण। इतनी आज तुनहु पवन सुख, इतनी आज तुनहु पवन सुख, इन मूर्ति जीव प्राण। राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान, हरे राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान। सुनो हनुमान सुनो हनुमान, सुनो हनुमान, राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान, हरे राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान। बैर सुषेण कहे रघुनंदन, लक्ष्मण राखी प्राण, लक्ष्मण राखी प्राण। बैर सुषेण कहे रघुनंदन, Lakshman राखी प्राण, to save the life of Lakshman, who was fatally wounded upon the battlefield by Meghnad. The doctor directed them to bring back the Mool Sajivan in order to revive Lakshman. It is Hanumanji, my dear friends, who was sent in search of this Mool Sajivan. Not being able to identify the plant alone, the Sanjeevani plant, he says, I will not return empty-handed to my Lord, Sri Ram. And so taking that form larger than the mountain itself, he picked up the mountain in hand and took back the mountain and plant as well with him back to the battlefield in order to revive Lakshman. बैर सुषेण कहे रघुनंदन, लक्ष्मण राखी प्राण, लक्ष्मण राखी प्राण। तुलसीदास भजु भगवाना, तुलसीदास भजु भगवाना, देखी वीर सुजान। राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान, हरे राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान। सुनो हनुमान सुनो हनुमान, सुनो हनुमान, राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान, हरे राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान, हरे राम भय व्याकुल सुनो हनुमान। बोल पवन पुत्र हनुमान की जय। And we now turn our attention to our katha tonight, in the first night of this Devi Puran Yagya. We read the beautiful katha of no Durga Mata, of course, the 9 manifestations of Divine Mother Durga Devi. In last night's katha, we read of the descent of Ganga Mata from her heavenly abode in order to redeem the sons of Rajasagar of the sins that they had committed. And of course, up to this day, whatever transgressions, whatever wrongdoings we commit, my dear friends, the blessings of Ganga Mata is still there to absolve us of whatever sins that we may commit. You know, there is a beautiful katha in Shiv Puran that once a cow, the cow had observed the master, its owner, beating the young calf one day. Why? Because as the master was trying to milk the cow, the calf, the bacha, what we say in Hindi, the young one, is coming and, also drinking milk at the same time, thus reducing the amount of milk that the master would be able to get from the cow. And so the master, the owner of the cow, becomes angry and takes a stick and beats the young calf. He hits the calf, so the calf, of course, would run away and he would be able to get all the milk that he desires from the mother cow. But the mother was very upset, with what the master had done. Certainly any mother would be upset. The milk is first and foremost for the young bacha, the young cow, the calf. And of course, whatever is left, then of course the master can use it for dahi and ghee and whatever purposes he wants to. And so when he had completed milking her, she said to her calf, tomorrow when he comes to get milk, I will boot him. This was the intention of the mother, She wanted in some way to find some reprieve for this, violence that he had shown to her young calf. And so, my dear friends, the next morning the master did not come. He sent his son to milk the cow. But that anger was still within the cow, my dear friends. And she saw the child coming to milk her. She ran towards him with her head lowered. And what happened? The horns of the cow pierced the chest, the stomach region of the child. And what happened? The child died. Immediately, this cow that was white, a pure white color, immediately as she had performed this act of now taking the life of the child, now both acts are equally wrong. As we often say, two wrongs don't make a right. It was wrong for the master to beat the young heifer, isn't it? And of course, it is also wrong for the mother who wanted some form of a reprieve or reprisal or vengeance against the master. It was wrong for her to also attack the child and also, obviously, to take the life of the child. And immediately, my dear friends, that act of taking the life of a human being showed for the white color change into black. And she wanted a way to absolve herself of her sins. And she knew, my dear friends, that by going to Ganga, that sacred river of which we read last night, and having a bath in the holy waters of the Ganga would redeem her of her sins. And so it is described in Shiv Puran that as she entered into the waters of Ganga, and this was actually a tributary of Ganga into the Gomati river. So she didn't get quite to the Ganga, but to the tributary of Gomati river, which is equally sacred and pure. As she entered into the water, my dear friends, and she bathed in the waters of the Gomati river, my dear friends, as she re-emerged from the water, that white color, that pure white color was regained once more. So that's just supporting instance, my dear friends, a reference from Shiv Puran of the great nature, the divine nature, the sacred nature of the waters of Ganga. And that's, my dear friends, the beautiful katha that we heard last night, the descent of Ganga Mata upon the pleas and the prayers of Bhagirath, coming to, of course, redeem his ancestors of the transgressions and sins that they had committed. In tonight's katha, we're looking at Savitri Mata, and the great lessons, my dear friends, we learn from Savitri Devi. So let us continue now to dedicate our thoughts to Divine Mother. as we receive these sacred lines on the pages of Devi Bhagwat Puran Katha. Jagadishwari daya karo maa, Paratishwari raksha karo maa. Be merciful, O Mother. Raksha karo, kripa karo. Protect us, safeguard us. Shower your bountiful blessings upon us. Jagadishwari daya karo maa, Paratishwari kripa karo maa. Jagadishwari daya karo maa. Ved Vyas Ji Maharaj bole, He Janmejay. This katha was originally narrated by Ved Vyas Ji Maharaj to Janmejay, the son of that illustrious king, Raja Parikshit. महाराज अश्वपति मद्रा देश के राजा थे। उनकी स्त्री का नाम मालती था। यद्यपि राजा बड़े ही शूरवीर बुद्धिमान धर्मात्मा के, किंतु उनके कोई संतान नहीं थी। इससे दुखी होकर राजा और रानी ने अपने गुरु वशिष्ठ जी से पुत्र प्राप्ति का उपाय पूछा। वशिष्ठ जी उन्होंने समझाया कि लोग पुत्र प्राप्ति के लिए सावित्री देवी का पूजन करो। राजा अश्वपति इसके लिए अपनी पत्नी को अवश्य को करके तप हेतु पुष्कर श्रेष्ठ में चले गए। वहां ऋषि पराशर से भेंट होने पर उन्होंने राजा को बताया कि सावित्री देवी की प्रसन्न करने हेतु सबसे अच्छा उपाय है। गायत्री मंत्र का जाप। पराशर जी यह भी कहा कि पूर्व दिशा की ओर मुख करके सावित्री माता का ध्यान करते हुए 100 लाख गायत्री मंत्र का जाप करने के निश्चित रूप से सभी माताओं कामनाओं की पूर्ति हो जाती है। यही नहीं, इसके द्वारा मनुष्य अपने जन्मांतरों के पाप से छुटकारा पा जाता है। यदि इस मंत्र का जाप 10 करोड़ की संख्या में किया जाते हैं, जीव आवागमन के चक्र से पूर्ण रूप से मुक्ति पा सकते हैं। पराशर जी के राजा को इस बात के लिए भी श्वेत किया, गिनती में भूल बिल्कुल नहीं। तुलसी या रुद्राक्ष का माला प्रयोग के लाया जाते हैं। यही नहीं, साधक की चाहिए कि वह गायत्री मंत्र का जाप को लिए मंदिर और किसी तीर्थ स्नान को चुने। इस मंत्र के अलावा उनका स्वरूप पूजन भी सभी तरह की अभिष्ट प्रदान करने वाला होता है। जगदीश्वरी दया करो माँ, परतीश्वरी कृपा करो माँ। जगदीश्वरी दया करो माँ, परतीश्वरी कृपा करो माँ। जगदीश्वरी दया करो माँ। प्रेम से बोले श्री आदि शक्ति देवी दुर्गा माता की जय। In the kingdom of Madhra Desh, there lived a dharmic, virtuous, respectable and very wealthy, famous king by the name of Raja Ashwapati. The queen's name was Rani Malti. Together, my dear friends, they governed over that kingdom in a just and fair manner. Their home was always filled with great joy and happiness. But despite all his successes, there was a certain emptiness in the king's life. For he desired very much to have a child, an offspring. But this had proven to be difficult or futile thus far. And so he consulted with the Guru. And the Guru, Vashishta Muni, directed him to go to Parashad Muni, who lived in the forested regions, and said to the king Raja Ashwapati and the queen Rani Malti that you must follow the instructions of Parashad Muni. He would guide you to success in this achieving this desire that you have for the gift of a child. And so, my dear friends, they left their kingdom behind in the hands, the governance of the trusted ministers of that kingdom. And there they went to the forested regions and paid their obeisances to Parashad Muni, who directed them that in order to fulfill this vardhan, this desire, you must perform Gayatri Mantra. By reciting this mantra 1,000,000 times, you will be successful in having the gift of this offspring that you desire. Now, obviously, that's a lot to recite. When we tell people to do one mala, they say that's 108. That's a lot of chanting. But my dear friends, when you get into the habit of performing the japa, one mala might take you 10 minutes, maybe less, depending on the speed with which you are chanting the mantras. And so, my dear friends, this undertaking was a massive undertaking for the king and queen. Remember, they had a kingdom to administer, to run. Would they return to the kingdom and say, look, this million jap is too much for us? Or would they accept the directives and the guidance of Parashad Muni? They said to him, O Parashad Muni, if this is what is required of us, then certainly, right here, if you would instruct us, if you would advise us and direct us what to do, right here in this forest, we will not, in fact, return to our kingdom until we have completed what you have assigned to us to do. And so, my dear friends, with full faith, with full conviction and belief, under the guidance of Parashad Muni, they undertook the chanting of Gayatri Mantra 1,000,000 times. Ved Vyasi Maharaj says that for 18 months, that's a year and a half, for 18 months, the king and queen remained in the forest at the ashram of Parashad Muni, leaving their kingdom behind with this intent, my dear friends, with this focus of achieving this objective of completing the recitation of Gayatri Mantra 1,000,000 times, my dear friends. We would normally do 108 and hang up the mala and say, look, it's over, be done. 10 minutes, that's all we give. Sometimes people do 5 malas, some, go beyond that and do 9 malas and so on, and that's very good, my dear friends. The greater the input, the greater the output. The greater the sacrifice, the greater the reward. And the king and queen understood this, my dear friends, and they undertook this chanting, my dear friends. For 18 months it took them, my dear friends, the chanting of this Gayatri Mantra to ensure that they had completed in the required and recommended manner the chanting of this sacred Gayatri Mantra. So let us find out, my dear friends, what is so significant, what is so great, what is so rewarding about chanting the Gayatri Mantra. First of all, we'll share the meaning. We meditate upon the most adorable and supreme Lord, the Creator whose effulgence, divine light, illumines all realms, physical, mental, and spiritual. May this divine light illumine our intellect. Gayatri Mantra represents the Supreme Lord Vishnu Bhagwan, Shankar Bhagwan, and Lord Brahma. Within the Gayatri Mantra, the presence, the essence, and the power of all three, my dear friends, is felt. Gayatri is the mother of the Vedas, and Gayatri gives birth, my dear friends, to divine knowledge, and also, my dear friends, with her blessings, gives us that opportunity to have the birth of a child in our homes. O Supreme Being, cause of all manifestations in this universe, Creator, Sustainer of the earth, the atmospheric and celestial regions, we meditate upon your divine radiance and adorable nature. May you illumine and inspire our intellect. All of these greatness, my dear friends, the greatness and the glorifications of Bhagwan is what we are invoking into our lives as well when we chant the Gayatri Mantra. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Om Bhurabhuva Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yona Prachodayat. Boliye Shri Gayatri Mata ki Jai. Devotees, if in 10 minutes you can do one mala, it means in 1 hour you'll be able to do 6 malas. So this 18 months, my dear friends, and in 10 hours, of course, you'll be able to do, 60. So it's not as difficult as it sounds. This 18 months that they spent at Parashar Muni's ashram, therefore, completing the chanting of 1 million Gayatri Jap, my dear friends, was well spent. And my dear friends, it was not continuous chanting. They had time to listen to Katha. They would do chanting, and under the guidance of Parashar Muni, they would listen to Katha as you are listening here. They would engage in puja, and then again they would go into their Gayatri Mantra Jap. I want to continue to share with you some information before we find out what rewards, what blessings the king Raja Ashwapati and the queen gained from the chanting of this 1 million Gayatri Mantra jap, my dear friends, it also shares with us here in Devi Puran some scientific background on the chanting and the origin of the Gayatri Mantra. According to astrophysicists and astronomers, a sound is produced due to the fast movement of the earth. The planets and the galaxy, or the Milky Way, what is called the Chir Sagar. Now those who follow, astronomical research and discoveries and so on, would know that this Chir Sagar, or this Milky Ocean that Lord Vishnu resides upon, reclining upon Sheshnag, is what is referred to as the Milky Way, discovered, my dear friends, by the astronomers. Again, we make the connection, my dear friends, between what is read in our ancient texts and what, of course, the Western researchers develop, and is actually now only catching up with us, with the Hindu text, my dear friends, and what has always been recorded and documented in our religious scriptures. So, the rotation of the earth and the planets produces a sound called Akshya Ganga, with approximately 100 million stars. Now when we look at the night sky, we are just able to see a few. And somebody said it seems long time had more stars than now. But if you're old enough, and if you grew up in a time when there was not so much electrical lights, and there were not so many homes and so on, streets and street lights and so on, you would actually remember a time when, my dear friends, it appeared as though there were more stars in the night sky. In fact, the number has not changed. What has changed is the development. And of course, the more lights that we see on earth, my dear friends, it would diminish our ability to see the lights in the sky. And so there exists approximately 100 million stars in the galaxy. So the moon and the earth are all revolving around the sun, each moving at their own axis at a mind-boggling velocity of 20,000 miles per second. We drive our motor car maybe at 50 or 60 miles per hour. We say, boy, that's fast. Listen to the speed of the earth. At 20,000 miles per second, it produces the sound that the sages have named, my dear friends, as Om. And of course, those who are into meditation and yoga and so on, would engage in the chanting of just that one sound, Om, and of course the lingering end syllable, Om. That sound, my dear friends, is what is heard, not visible or not audible, I should say, to our ear. But this is what is described, my dear friends, that sound that is produced by the rotation of the earth. And so that's the very first letter in the Gayatri Mantra, Om. The sum of the Gayatri Mantra states, the earth, Bhura, the planets, Bhuva, and the galaxy, Swaha, are rotating on their own axis at a great velocity, which is a formless entity. The total kinetic energy generated by these movements balance the overall energy consumption of the cosmos, and this is named the pranav, or the body energy. That is, mass of galaxies multiplied by 2. And there's a little equation here, mass multiplied by velocity multiplied by 2. That supreme entity, God, who manifests in the form of the utmost regions, the sun or Savitri, is indeed worth of surrender, Varenium. One should meditate Dhimahi upon the light Bhargo of that entity, Devasya, and perform the chanting of Om and guide us in the direction of Prachodayat. My dear friends, an intellect which is Dhiyoyo. That, my dear friends, is a complete breakdown of the Gayatri Mantra and how scientific, my dear friends, the chanting of that Gayatri Mantra is. And when they had completed, devotees, the chanting of the Gayatri Mantra 1,000,000 times, he said to them, not only have you achieved and secured the blessing of a child who would possess the divine qualities of Savitri Devi herself, but you have also secured and achieved moksha by chanting that Gayatri Mantra 1,000,000 times. Anyone, it is recorded right here in Devi Bhagwat Puran Katha, who would chant the Gayatri Mantra 1,000,000 times secures a place in Vaikuntha Lok and achieves moksha. How difficult it is, my dear friends. Bhagwan, in fact, makes it very easily. People would spend an entire lifetime engaged in all sorts of unscrupulous activities and wayward behavior and occupation of time. Look at what Bhagwan tells us to absorb our energies into. Chanting this Gayatri Mantra, my dear friends, very profound, very prolific, very powerful, very rewarding. And that, my dear friends, which we seek to attain, to ascend into his heavenly abode, we can achieve that as well. So they chanted it, for the purpose of the gift of a child, but also, my dear friends, this great reward has been bestowed upon them, that they, by virtue of this, has simultaneously also secured their place whenever their time would come to an end in Bhagwan's heavenly abode in Vaikuntha Loka. And so he says to them, return to your kingdom. In due course of time, this child that you desire will be born to you. And so, my dear friends, returning to their kingdom, they continued governing their kingdom, and we're told in Devi Bhagwat Puran Katha that in due course of time, Saraswati Mata took manifestation into their home as Savitri Devi. Ma Sharade. And from the very formative years of her life, she displayed exquisite and extraordinary powers and knowledge. At the age of 5, Savitri Mata could chant all the shlokas of the Vedas and the Puranas, Upanishads. Even the great rishis and munis, my dear friends, acknowledged the great knowledge of Savitri Mata. Ma Sharade, Ma Sharade, Hansvahini, Veena Pani, Brahmavamini, Kala Swamini, Jagatarade, Ma Sharade, Ma Sharade, Hansvahini, Veena Pani, Brahmavamini, Kala Swamini, Jagatarade, Ma Sharade. ज्ञानहीन में ध्यानहीन में बुद्धिहीन विवेकहीन में ज्ञानहीन में ध्यानहीन में बुद्धिहीन विवेकहीन में जग तार दे मां शारदे विवेकहीन में जग तार दे माँ शारदे। माँ शारदे हंस वाहिनी वीणा पानी ब्रह्मवामिनी कला स्वामिनी जग तार दे माँ शारदे। हृदय गगन में मर्च पवन में मुक्त पवन में जन जीवन में। हृदय गगन में मर्च पवन में मुक्त पवन में जन जीवन में। जन जीवन में रेश तार दे माँ शारदे। जन जीवन में रेश तार दे माँ शारदे। माँ शारदे हंस वाहिनी वीणा पानी ब्रह्मवामिनी कला स्वामिनी जग तार दे माँ शारदे। कला स्वामिनी जग तार दे माँ शारदे। कला स्वामिनी जग तार दे माँ शारदे। प्रेम से बोले श्री सावित्री माता की जय, श्री देवी सरस्वती माता की जय. And so my dear friends, from a very young age, the extraordinary knowledge and powers of Savitri was acknowledged not just by her parents, Raja Ashwapati and Malti Devi, but also by the great rishis and munis, the very knowledgeable sages, my dear friends, were astonished by the great knowledge that was possessed by this young child. As she grew into a young lady, it was decided that the time had arrived. That is, she had reached marriageable age, and it was time that Savitri became married. And so the king at first instructed his most trusted minister, I want you to go to the neighboring kingdoms and look at the various princes. O chief minister, identify someone who matches the great knowledge and spirituality that Savitri possesses. You know, when we're looking for a good boy or a good girl, to get married to our child, we look at many different forms of compatibility. A lot of emphasis is placed purely on the physical appearance. Make sure the boy not too fat or too tall or too thin. We try to look at only at the physical aspects of compatibility. But here the king has emphasized two very important aspects which sometimes are neglected. Ensure that prince is as knowledgeable as she is. If Dulaha and Dulahin, wife and husband, are having a conversation, and there are different levels of knowledge and spirituality. So he says that prince must be knowledgeable and must be spiritual. Just as Savitri is performing puja and so on every day, he too, that prince, must also have that desire to also sit with her and perform puja and discuss the greatness of the scriptures and so on, as she does on a daily basis. So if Dulaha and Dulahin are sitting and having a conversation, and the Dulahin is more into puja, she wants to speak about puja and going to the mandir, and the Dulaha is only speaking about going to the madhushala. What is the madhushala? Where the alcohol is sold, the bar, the rum shop. Then of course one going east and one going west, the opposite directions. So there must be spiritual compatibility as well. Yes, nothing is wrong, Physical compatibility is important. Height and color and whatnot you look for, nothing is wrong. Secure that, but do not neglect the spiritual component my dear friends, and the component of knowledge, so that they would be able to communicate on the same level, on the same wavelength as we see. And when it's time to do fasting and perform puja, the Dulaha wouldn't get vexed and say, look, only baigan takari and aloo choka I have to eat. He's looking for some other type of bhojan, and Dulahin is fasting, so she's preparing vegetarian bhojan. So if they're on the same wavelength of spirituality, there would not be that conflict, my dear friends, arising. And as Hindus, when we look at the Hindu calendar, so many times in the Hindu calendar, when sometimes months on end, it is required, there's a requirement for us to be fasting. And some will tell you when they get into that fasting phase, they remain fasting because they feel so good and feel so different and feel so special. They do not want to revert back, my dear friends, to eating the food they was eating before. And some actually remain, in the vegetarian mood, which is commendable and which, of course, is beneficial to you, not just spiritually, but physically and healthy. My dear friends, you become a healthier individual as well when you stick to that fasting and to that vegetarian diet. So this is the direction of the king. This is what he says to the chief minister. And so he goes, the chief minister, as the king has requested him, and he spends a few months, my dear friends, going to all the surrounding regions. He speaks to many of the princes in the surrounding regions, but he does not get from them what the king is looking for. Yes, they are princes. Yes, but they are not the ones who are spiritually inclined and, inclined to do puja and so on. They are just, royalty. And so he reported this to the king. And the king, after due consideration, said to Savitri that, Beti, perhaps you should act upon this yourself. Perhaps you, O Savitri, should select someone for yourself who you think is compatible with you. And so devotee Savitri followed the instructions of her father. And with the same chief minister, she too began to, look about the kingdom and surrounding regions and so on, meeting various people and speaking to various people and ascertaining, their background and spirituality and knowledge and so on. And she too was having a difficult time, finding that individual who possessed all of these divine attributes and so on. On one occasion, as they were returning to the palace, they were going through a forested region, and it is here that Savitri saw Satyavan. Satyavan lived with his parents in the forest. His father was actually a king who was driven out of his kingdom and now lived in exile in the forest. The king, Raja Jumat, was now much advanced in age. He had grown blind. And so Satyavan, they had only one child, looked after his parents in the forest and, earned a living by cutting the forest logs and selling firewood and so on. So they lived a very simple life, although, my dear friends, they really were supposed to be in the palace, governing their kingdom, but due to the greed of certain ministers, sometimes when your most trusted minister gets too much power, he can try to get rid of the king or the prime minister or the president, as the case may be. And this is what had happened to Raja Jumat. And so they fled to the safety of the forest and lived, my dear friends, in virtual exile. And so Savitri came across Satyavan, and she had a conversation with Satyavan. And in speaking with Satyavan, she was surprised, she was astonished by the great knowledge. In speaking to someone, you would be able to determine the educational background and the knowledge of that individual. For instance, in Ramcharitamanas, Sugriv had sent Hanumanji to find out about Sri Ram and Lakshman, their identity as they were approaching the Rishimukh Parvat. Ko tum shyamal gaur sharira chhatri roop phirahu ban bira Jai Ram Shri Ram Jaya Jaya Rama Shri Ram Jai Jaya Rama. And as Hanumanji, in the disguise of a brahmachar, spoke to Shri Ram thought to himself that this is no ordinary brahmachar. Judging by the manner in which he is speaking, I can determine he is a highly intelligent individual. He drew that conclusion based on the manner in which Hanumanji spoke to him. Similarly, Savitri is drawing certain conclusions based on the manner in which Satyavan is responding to her, that this is no ordinary woodcutter, for that's what he was doing. He had an axe in his hand and he was cutting the logs in the forest. This is no ordinary woodcutter. This is a highly intelligent individual. And so, my dear friends, after having this conversation with Satyavan, she returned to the palace and said to her father, Pitaji, I have found someone. I have found someone that I wish to get married to. And his name is Satyavan. And so the father was very happy, of the discovery or the statement that Savitri was making to him. And so immediately he sent his chief minister to contact Satyavan and his parents, and he brought them to the palace. And he says, they found out that, of course, this elderly blind man was actually an exiled king. And of course, this woodcutter, Satyavan, was an exiled prince, driven out of their palace and living now as hermits in the forest. And despite the fact that they were living as hermits in the forest, the king accepted the marriage proposal, and all arrangements were now put into place for the marriage of Savitri and Satyavan. And on the day before the marriage took place, the Guru came to the home hurriedly and with great anxiety and said to the king, we must put a stop to this wedding at once. Why? The king inquired. Everything is in place for this marriage to take place. He says, your son-in-law to be has a very short lifespan. Exactly 1 year after this marriage, he would die. Your daughter would become a widow 1 year after marriage. O king, you must cancel this wedding at once. The king actually agreed with the Guru that this did not make sense to marry someone who had such a short lifespan. But when he said this to Savitri, she was very upset. She says to her father, Pitaji, I have already given my word to Satyavan. I have made up my mind, and it is only Satyavan that I would marry. If it is that I have to spend only 1 year with him, if Bhagwan wills this to be so, then so be it. But I will marry no other. And so upon her insistence, the king reluctantly, my dear friends, carried forward with the marriage. And on the day of the marriage, my dear friends, he said to his son-in-law Satyavan, you do not have to go back to the forest to live. I have only one child, and you have become married to her. This kingdom, O Satyavan, is now yours. And Satyavan said, no, I cannot accept this. My place is with my parents. They are very elderly. My father is blind. And I cannot leave him alone at this time when he needs me. And so I cannot accept this offer. The king was taken aback. Who refuses, my dear friend, such an offer? As we would say, who in their right mind would refuse such an offer. The king had only one daughter, and here he's offering the kingdom to his son-in-law. You live as an exile, as a woodcutter in the forest. This kingdom is now yours. I vacate my throne and I give to you, O Satyavan. And he says, no, I cannot accept it. For my parents would not come to live in this palace, and if they are not here, then I cannot be here as well. And so he says, after the marriage, I have to return to my home with my parents. But what would Savitri do? She was not used to, living in the forest. She born and grew in the palace, isn't it? She was never exposed to the hardships of forest life. She had the servants of the palace to wait upon her, to do all the cooking and cleaning and washing and whatever household chores needs to be performed. Savitri never had to do these chores. Would she say to Satyavan, look, well, you go back to the forest if you want, and I will stay here in the palace? She said to her father and to her mother that my place is now with my husband. And if he chooses to live in the forest, then my place is with him, living in the forest. This is when we understand what our duties are, my dear friends. This is when we understand what the devotion and dedication is all about when we enter into Grihas Ashram, the householders, the marriage stage of life. I promise, the Hindu marriage vows in fact clearly states, I make this pledge to remain with you in good health, in ill health, in poverty, in riches, whatever circumstances come our way, I make this promise and this pledge to remain at your side. If you look at Sita Devi, she was placed in a similar situation. Remember, she was the daughter of Raja Janak. She grew up in the palace in Mithila, and of course she became married to Sri Ram, the son of Raja Dashrath. There was a certain expectation. When people get married, there are certain expectations going into that marriage. And sometimes the expectations do not always materialize. And when those expectations do not materialize, people quick to pack the bag and hit the road, as we say. So what happened with Sita Devi, my dear friends? She got married to Sri Ram, and there was the expectation that, of course, he was going to become the king of Ayodhya. And she was simply moving from one palace in Mithila to the next palace in Ayodhya. But we all know what happened. Instead of becoming the king of Ayodhya, Sri Ram was banished to the forest for 14 years. So what did Sita Devi do? She said to him, Prabhu, I wish to accompany you to the forest. He says, Nahi, no. Sita, it is I who have been banished to the forest, not you. And we must understand clearly, my dear friends, Sita under no circumstances was expected to go to the forest. The banishment was for Sri Ram alone. He says to her, remain in Ayodhya, for the forest is a very dangerous place. There are snakes and scorpions and lions and tigers and so on there. The forest is no place for a lady like you, O Siti. In 14 years we will be reunited. Stay here in the palace. She said to him, my lord, what is the diya without the light? What is the river without its waters? What is the night sky without the stars? But what do you think, devotees? The diya without the light is incomplete. The river without water similarly is incomplete. And the night sky without stars looks bleak and dismal. It is incomplete as well. Similarly, my Lord, without you, I am incomplete, and vice versa. If you leave me here in this palace will become like a jungle to me. And if you take me to the jungle, that jungle will become my palace. When she spoke in this manner, he smiled and said, Sita, I cannot say no to you. What you have said is scripturally correct. You see, devotees, when we want to get our point across, let's put this into a typical marriage between wife and husband. She says, look, I want to go with you. What did he say? He said, no, you stay home. What happens when the Dullahin gets that response? Everything begins to go south, right? Everything started to capsize in the home. But she did not raise her voice. She did not quarrel with him. In fact, she spoke in a highly philosophical manner. What is the diya without the light? What is the river without the water? You see nice lyrics. You talk about speaking with nice lyrics and nice meaning and so on. This is what she's doing, my dear friends. And when you respond in an intelligent and sensible manner, instead of becoming aggressive and confrontational and so on, when you speak in this intelligent and sensible manner, then he had no choice. He was left with no other alternative, simply to say to her, I cannot say no to you. Make all preparations, O Siti. You too shall accompany me to the forest. As Savitri is saying to her father, my place is with my husband. I too shall accompany Satyavan and his parents to the little hut in the forest. And so, my dear friends, she left behind the wonderful Mahal, the great palace in Madhya Pradesh, and went off to live with Satyavan and his parents in the forest. Mehndi Mahavar रच कर भी सुख सपनों से संन्यास लिया धन्य सुहागिन वो जिसने भारत को तुलसीदास दिया. And this bhajan, my dear friends, describes the devotion of the Dullahin, and it should be the Dullaha as well. Both individuals need to be devoted to the home and to the marriage and to each other. And when that devotion and dedication is there, my dear friends, obviously, that joy and happiness and so on of marital bliss will be experienced. है धन्य सुहागिन वो जिसने भारत को तुलसी दास दिया. मेहंदी महावर रच कर भी सुख सपनों से संन्यास लिया. है धन्य सुहागिन वो जिसने भारत को तुलसी दास दिया. मेहंदी महावर रच कर भी सुख सपनों से संन्यास लिया. है धन्य सुहागिन वो जिसने भारत को तुलसी दास दिया. कंगन पहने थी तुमने भी बजाए थी पायल. तुमने भी किया था नैनों से कुछ दिन को सवरिया को घायल. मिलने आए तुमसे प्रीतम मिलने आए तुमसे प्रीतम, तो भेज राम के पास दिया। है धन्य सुहागिन वो जिसने भारत को तुलसीदास दिया। मेहंदी महावर रच कर भी सुख सपनों से सन्यास लिया। है धन्य सुहागिन वो जिसने भारत को तुलसीदास दिया। सच मानो तुलसी ना होते तो हिंदी कहीं परी होती। उसके माथे पर रामायण की बिंदी नहीं जगी होती। बीसों बसंत देखर जिसने, बीसों बसंत देखर जिसने, बदले में बस 100 मास लिया। है धन्य सुहागिन वो जिसने भारत को तुलसीदास दिया। मेहंदी महावर रच कर भी सुख सपनों से सन्यास लिया। है धन्य सुहागिन वो जिसने भारत को तुलसीदास दिया। जाओ कभी जब तक राम अमर, दुनिया में तेरा नाम अमर। दुनिया पूजेगी रघुवर को, गूंजेगा तेरा स्वर घर घर। जीवन तो दिया हरि हमको, जीवन तो दिया हरि हमको। हरि लीला का इतिहास दिया। है धन्य सुहागिन वो जिसने भारत को तुलसीदास दिया। मेहंदी महावर रच कर भी सुख सपनों से सन्यास लिया। मेहंदी महावर रच कर भी सुख सपनों से सन्यास लिया। है धन्य सुहागिन वो जिसने भारत को तुलसीदास दिया। भारत को तुलसीदास दिया। भारत को तुलसीदास दिया। प्रेम से बोले सीतापति रामचंद्र की जय। आदि शक्ति देवी दुर्गा माता की जय। My dear friends, even as Savitri began her life in the forest with her husband Satyavan, always uppermost in her mind is what the Guru had said to her and to her father. What he had said, in 1 year's time, Savitri will become a widow. But she never said this to Satyavan or to his parents. She began her new life, performing the household chores as anyone would do. In the forest, she had to fetch water from a nearby well to prepare the food and the washing and so on, what have you, in the home, in the little hut in which they lived in the forest. And this she did, my dear friends, willingly and unhesitatingly. But whenever she had the opportunity, whenever she had a chance, my dear friends, she would make time to engage in puja and worship. In fact, this occurred on a daily basis. So she made time every single day. And she's praying to Bhagwati Mata for what? Longevity, long life for herself and for her husband. And as the months went by and approached the 1 year anniversary, which is supposed to be, of course, their first year wedding anniversary, when it was said and predicted by the Guru that Satyavan would die, Savitri began an all-out fast, complete fast. My dear friends, approximately about 3 months leading up to the 1 year wedding anniversary, she started to fast completely, every single day, my dear friends. In fact, the fasting was so intense that as the weeks went by, she became very frail. She lost a lot of weight. But yet she attended to household chores and so on. As we say, she didn't miss a beat, performing all that was necessary to be performed, my dear friends, in the home, cooking and, all the household duties and so on. Yet, she maintained her fast and performed the necessary puja and so on, and continued to pray as she had done for the duration of the year, that her husband would have a long life. Is it possible, my dear friends, that if in fact someone, is destined to die at a certain time, a certain age, that, repeated devotion and intense puja, as Savitri is doing, can actually prolong the life of that individual? Well, we're going to find out what becomes of Satyavan. On that day, my dear friends, that Satyavan is supposed to die, and that must be a very dismal feeling. Someone may get sick in our home, and we know that, this person wouldn't make it too long. Maybe a few weeks, maybe a few months. But nobody wakes up with this thought that Savitri woke up that morning. Today is the day my husband is going to die. What would you do on such a day? Well, what she has been doing for the past year, preparing the food and, the normal household daily duties and so on. And on that day, my dear friends, as Satyavan took up his axe to go out into the forest to fell the trees, she says to him, "Today, Satyavan, I will accompany you to your work." And he says to her, "No, you stay home. You have been fasting so long, you're very weak and so on. Stay home and rest. I will go alone. Give me the food." But she held on to the lunch or whatever she had cooked and prepared for him. And she says, "No, I will accompany you." And so because she insisted, he agreed. And so they set off early that morning, my dear friends, into the forest. And very soon they reached a clearing in the forest where Satyavan indeed had been cutting down the forest trees and so on. And so he says to her, "Savitri, this is a dangerous work. These trees can fall in any direction, and if it falls on you, you may get hurt." In fact, recently we had, maybe a week or two ago, there was an incident where a tree fell. I think a father and son died because they were standing in the wrong direction. So they cut the tree and they stood supposedly where the tree is going to fall, and it fell on both of them and they both died. So this is what Satyavan is explaining to Savitri. This is a very dangerous job that I perform. And if you're in the wrong place, this tree may fall on you, it may hurt you or even kill you. So he says, "Look, go and sit in the distance. Under that tree, you'll get some shade as well, and you'll be safe there." Obediently, she went and sat in the distance. And she's looking at Satyavan now. He would swing the axe into the air and, powerfully strike the trees, my dear friends, with the axe. It would create a very loud sound, it disturbing the quiet of the forest in the morning time. And as he's so doing, my dear friends, on one occasion when he swung the axe into the air, the axe fell from his grasp. He held his head with both hands and he fell to the ground. Anxiously, she got up from where she was sitting and she ran towards Satyavan. She lifted his head and cradled his head in her hands. And as she looked down into the eyes of Satyavan, He looked up at hers and he died. What was she to do? Well, what would anybody do? At that moment, she could do nothing, my dear friends. But even as she held her husband's lifeless body now in her hands, now all of the tapasya and so on that she has been performing now gave her a certain gift. We would not have this gift. We would not have this ability. So while Devi could not prevent her husband from dying, Divine Mother gave her this gift, that even as she held her husband in her hands, the lifeless body of Satyavan, she felt someone standing over her. That unseen person was Yamaraj. As I said, we would not have that gift. Yamaraj would come and take the life energy, the Jiva Atma of our family members, and we would not know when he arrives and when he leaves. So while Divine Mother could not prevent the death of Satyavan, as we say, whomever is born must die. And even whilst the child is yet in the womb of the mother, that allotment of time has already been determined. So that is written, my dear friends, it cannot be averted. But here is where Divine Mother gave her that gift. And without looking up, she asked, "Who are you?" And Yamaraj says, "I am Yamaraj, and what are you doing here?" She says to him, "I have come to take your husband with me." And he took the Jivatma, the soul of Satyavan, and he left Savitri holding the body of Satyavan in her hands. And she dropped the body of Satyavan on the ground and she began to follow Yamaraj. So who is the true Satyavan? Is it the body that she left on the ground, or what, that unseen energy that Yamaraj is taking with him? As Lord Krishna had asked Arjuna, "Who are you, O Arjuna? Are you this physical body or are you the soul?" टूट गई है माला मोती बिखर चले दो दिन रह कर साथ जाने किधर चले टूट गई है माला. When the mala is broken, when that time of death, when the Marniki Samay, the time of death arises, the soul escapes from this body, and the body, the physical body, the Manusharir, becomes lifeless. It is placed upon the pyre and burnt away to ashes. But Bhagavan says that through you, O Arjun, is that unseen, that subtle body, that soul, that Jiva Atma. It is unborn, so it will not die. It is totally indestructible, O Arjun. You cannot wet it, you cannot burn it, you cannot alter it by any means whatsoever. And Savitri understood this. The true Satyavan is not this lifeless body, it is what Yamaraj is taking with him. So she followed Yamaraj. And he says to her, "Savitri, where I am taking Satyavan, you cannot come, you cannot go with me. Your time has not as yet arrived. Savitri, to die, your time has not as yet come. You must return and perform the Antim Sanskar, the last rites of your deceased husband. You cannot come with me, nor can you accompany your husband at this point in time." But yet she followed him. So he says to her, "Listen, I will give you one vardhan. Ask for anything but the life of your husband." Well, obviously this is what she wanted, isn't it? The life of Satyavan. Ask for anything except the life of your husband. And then what you ask, do not put in "and." You know, sometimes when we ask, when we're praying to Bhagavan, "Prabhu, bless me with the car and the house and the land and," you know, so "and" is an addition. Yamaraj says to her, ask for one thing, but do not include "and" have no additions and so on to what you ask for. And of course, we described, that she is the very embodiment of Saraswati Mata. She possesses great knowledge, the knowledge of the Puranas and Shastras and Vedas and so on. And my dear friends, when she was given this opportunity, she said to him, Prabhu, bless my blind father-in-law to see his grandchildren eating from golden dishes. No and? It have no and in that. Bless my blind father-in-law to see his grandchildren eating from golden dishes. Ewa mastu, so be it. He gave her the blessing. She didn't ask for Satyavan's life. No. And Yamaraj continued on his way, but Savitri followed him. And he says to her, look, I have given you this Vardhan, why are you still following me? And she says, Prabhu, if you do not return my husband's life, then your words will be false. My father-in-law has only one child, one son. And in order for him to have grandchildren, Satyavan needs to be alive. Yamaraj instantly saw the great intelligence of Savitri. And so he says to her, return, O Savitri, to where you have left Satyavan, and you will find him alive. And so, devotees, she did return, and when she got there, Satyavan was just sitting up, When he saw her walking towards him, he scolded her. Savitri, I told you this forest is very dangerous. Why did you leave me lying here and walking off by yourself in this forest? She did not say to him what had happened. She did not say to him that he had in fact died, and it's through the blessings of Yamaraj that, his life had been restored. She simply said to him, Satyavan, we need to return home immediately. And my dear friends, when they returned home, it was discovered, or her father-in-law discovered, that suddenly he had regained his eyesight. And just as they were celebrating the old man's ability to see again, some of the soldiers from the kingdom, the deposed, over which the deposed Dhumat had rule over, they arrived and appealed to him, O Raja, we have gotten rid of those who depose you from your throne, and we wish that you would return once more and become our king. And so, on that very same day, my dear friends, Savitri and Satyavan and his elderly parents returned to their kingdom, where Satyavan was given the kingship or the governance of that kingdom, and of course Savitri sat at his side, and they both governed for many, many happy years. In fact, Devi Bhagwat Puran tells us Satyavan lived to be in excess of 400 years. But that was in Satyug. We live in Kalyug, where Bhagwan has mandated 100 years for us. And even this 100 years has become difficult for us to achieve. Prem se bole Shri Shakti Devi Durga Mata ki jai. So we'll stop our katha at this stage. We'll invite Pundit to perform Havan with the Shrotas. So devotees, we would not have the opportunity that Satyavan had. For that life to be restored after death. It is through the persistence and the devotion and dedication of his wife, Savitri Devi, that this occurred. And so eventually, my dear friends, as this bhajan says, just as a bird flies away and disappears into the distance, our lives and our time in this world, similarly, my dear friends, is quickly disappearing before us as well. Make best use of this time that Bhagwan has given to us. चल उड़ जा रे पंछी, चल उड़ जा रे पंछी, अब ये पेश हुआ बेगाना। चल उड़ जा रे पंछी, अब ये पेश हुआ बेगाना। भूल जब वो मस्त हवा, वो उड़ना डाली डाली। जग की आँख का कांटा बन गई छाल तेरे मतवाली। कौन भला उसे भाग के पूछो, कौन भला उसे भाग के पूछो, कौन जिसका माली। तेरी किस्मत में लिखा है, तेरी किस्मत में लिखा है, जीते ही मर जाना। चल उड़ जा रे पंछी, अब ये देश हुआ बेगाना। चल उड़ जा रे पंछी, अब ये देश हुआ बेगाना। रोते हैं वो पंख फकेरू, साथ तेरे जो खेले। रोते हैं वो पंख फकेरू, साथ तेरे जो खेले। जिनके साथ लगाए तूने अरमानों को मिले। भीगी अखियों से ही उनकी, भीगी अखियों से ही उनकी आज दुआएं ले ले। किसको पता अब इस नगरी में, किसको पता अब इस नगरी में, कब हो तेरा आना। चल उड़ जा रे पंछी, अब ये देश हुआ बेगाना। चल उड़ जा रे पंछी, अब ये देश हुआ बेगाना। खत्म हुए दिन उस डाली के, जिस पर तेरा बसेरा था। आज यहाँ और कल हो वहाँ, ये जोगी वाला तेरा था। ये तेरी जागीर नहीं थी, ये तेरी जागीर नहीं थी, चार घड़ी का घेरा था। सदा रहा है इस दुनिया में, सदा रहा है इस दुनिया में, इसको आपो जाना। चल उड़ जा रे पंछी, अब ये देश हुआ बेगाना। चल उड़ जा रे पंछी, अब ये देश हुआ बेगाना। तूने तिनका चुन कर नगरी एक बसाई। बारिश में तेरी भीगी में, धूप में घरनी खाई। हम ना कर जो तेरी मेहनत, हम ना कर जो तेरी मेहनत, तेरा काम न आई। अच्छा है कुछ ले जाने से, अच्छा है कुछ ले जाने से, के कर कुछ भी जाना। चल उड़ जा रे पंछी कि अब ये देश हुआ बेगाना। चल उड़ जा रे पंछी कि अब ये देश हुआ बेगाना। चल उड़ जा रे पंछी। बोलो श्री आदिशक्ति देवी दुर्गा माता की जय। अच्छा, खड़ा हो जाए। Let us all stand. We join together firstly in Purnahuti and then Arati. Hari Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnam Yadakshate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Sarvam Vai Purnagam Sarvam Vai Purnagam Sarvam Vai Purnagam Swaha. Arpan Karadafaya Sarvatirat Samayuktam Sugandhim Nirmalam Jalamachmanyam Mayaritam Grahanam Parameshwaram. And so, my dear friends, we bear in mind the great lessons, the great sacrifice, the great dedication of Savitri Devi. Indeed, even the impossible can become possible when we possess that will, that power, that determination, my dear friends, to make it happen. We remain standing for Durga Mata Ji ki Arati. Om Sajam Chavachhitam Yuktam Mahina Yojitam Mayam Deepam Grahana Devasya Trailokyam Timirapaham. Jai Ambe Gauri Maiya Jai Shama Gauri. Jai Ambe Gauri Maiya Jai Shama Gauri. तुमको निस दिन ध्यावत हरि ब्रह्मा शिव जी। बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया जय श्यामा गौरी। मांग सिंदूर विराजत की को मृग मद को। उज्ज्वल से दो नैना चंद्रावली को। बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया जय श्यामा गौरी। कनक समान कलेवर रक्तांबर राजय। रक्त पुष्प गलमाला कंधन पर साजय। बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया जय श्यामा गौरी। कानन कुंडल शोभित नासाग्रे मोती। कोटिक चंद्र दिवाकर समराजत ज्योति। बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया जय श्यामा गौरी। ब्रह्माणि रुद्राणि तुम कमला रानी। अगम निगम बखानी तुम शिव पटरानी। बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी। चौसठ योगिनी गावत मिच करत भैरो। बाजत ताल मृदंगा और बाजत डमरू। बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी। चार अति शोभित वर मुद्राधारी। मनवांछित फल पावत सेवक नर नारी। बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी। श्री अम्बे जी की आरती जो कोई नर गावे। कहत शिवानंद स्वामी सुख संपत्ति पावे। बोलो जय अम्बे गौरी मैया, जय श्यामा गौरी। बोलो जय श्यामा गौरी। जगदम्बा देवी, जगदम्बा देवी, जय 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 जगदम्बा देवी। Let us all sing together, devotees, as receive the blessings of Durga Devi. जगदम्बा देवी, जगदम्बा देवी, जय 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 जगदम्बा देवी। जगदम्बा देवी, जगदम्बा देवी, जय 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 जगदम्बा देवी। दुर्गे दुर्गे माँ दुर्गे, जय जय माँ। दुर्गे दुर्गे माँ दुर्गे, जय जय माँ। दुर्गे दुर्गे दुर्गे, जय जय माँ। दुर्गे दुर्गे माँ दुर्गे, जय जय माँ। करुणा सागर माँ, काली कपाली जगदोधारिणी माँ। हे काली जय जय माँ। हे काली जय जय माँ। दुर्गे दुर्गे माँ दुर्गे, जय जय माँ। Durge Jai Jai Ma, Ma Durge Jai Jai Ma, Ma Durge Jai Jai Ma. We join together tonight in chanting Shri Shivaram Stotram. We pray for the blessings of Divine Mother to be bestowed firstly upon the deceased Anne-Marie Ramnath. Of course, we remember her as we dedicate these 3 nights of devotion in her name, that wherever she may be at this time, that the blessings of these 3 nights of Yajna, of devotion, would be conveyed to her. And of course to Mukesh, through whose perseverance and dedication we are here for these 3 nights, my dear friends. We pray that Divine Mother Durga Mata would continue to bestow her blessings upon you, Mukesh. May she continue to bless you with good health. And of course, that willingness and that desire, that steadfast devotion that you have demonstrated to the hosting of these 3 nights of devotion. And to all devotees who have come here over the past 3 nights, may the blessings of Bhagwati Mata be bestowed upon you. May you, Mother, continue to safeguard us and protect us against all dangers and difficulties. Shiva Hare Shiva Ram Sakhe Prabhu Tribidhata Panivaran He Vibho Aja Janeshwar Yadav Pahimam Shiva Hare Vijayam Kurume Varam Pratidinam Kusalam Jai Mangalam Kamalalochana Ram Dayanidhi Har Guru Gajarakshak Gopate Shivatano Bhavashankar Pahimam Shiva Hare Vijayam Kurume Varam Pratidinam Kusalam Jai Mangalam Sujanaranjana Mangala Mandiram Bhajati Te Purusha Paramam Param Bhavati Tasya Sukham Paramadhutam Shivatanu Vijayam Kurume Varam Pratidinam Kusalam Jai Mangalam Jaya Yudhishthira Vallabha Bhupate Jaya Jaya Ajita Punya Payonidhi Jai Kripa Mai Krishna Namastute Shiva Hare Vijayam Kurume Varam Pratidinam Kusalam Jai Mangalam Mantrahinam Kriyahinam Bhaktihinam Janadhanam Yat Pujitam Mayarevam Paripurnam Tadastu Me Tvameva Mata Cha Pita Tvameva Bandhusha Sakha Tvameva Vidya Dravinam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Om Shanti 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 Hari Om प्रेम से बोले श्री गजानन स्वामी की उमापति महादेव की पवन सुत हनुमान की श्री वृंदावन बिहारी लाल की उदय सा जगन्नाथ की बोलो भाई सब संतन की सियापति राम की. Let us hear all voices. श्री सत्य सनातन धर्म की जय जय सीताराम. आसन लीजिए. Kindly be seated, devotees.
Always on the go? Do you need that daily boost of inspiration?